We made a hoverboarding game. Well, technically, we're still making it. It's called Overrider and it's an action-adventure roguelike in which Vyra, a young engineer, goes out on a journey to save her home settlement from a robot invasion. It all started with just a simple capsule and now we have a smooth movement mechanic and a complete game loop. But it wasn't always like that. Hi, I'm Mitko and we are DreamTech. I gotta say, working on Overrider is a lot of fun. Our inspiration comes from games like Tony Hawk, SSX and Trickstyle, but also adventures like Breath of the Wild and Sonic. However, as fun as it is to work on a game like this, the design process has been tough. Instead of making it about racing and tricks, Overrider focuses on exploration and sometimes fighting robots. And sometimes racing. And sometimes tricks. That meant that we had to come up with a custom gameplay formula, one that hasn't quite been done before. And one of the big challenges we immediately had to face was... Overrider's movement mechanics are bipolar. You can ride slowly and pull off precise platforming, and in the next moment you could be moving at 100 miles per hour, dodging trees and sliding down steep slopes. These two types of gameplay rely on a fundamentally different behavior. One is a platformer, and the other is racing. Okay, so not a big deal. The solution here would be to have a button that toggles between the slow and fast modes, right? No. In DreamTech, we like to take the hardest, most obscure possible design approach and then cry ourselves to sleep. We made these two mechanics blend into each other as your speed changes. And getting this to work was a nightmare. Not only did the player movement have to change, but also the camera had to shift from a free-looking camera to one that's locked behind the character. All that without the player realizing it. And so through perseverance, we somehow did it. But our problems didn't end there. Oh no. This movement system has a big flaw. If you've got the skill and you can figure out how to gather momentum, you can go almost everywhere, which makes the level design an especially challenging task. A big question had to be answered when building Overrider's level design. How do you constrain and direct the player's attention with a movement system allowing for such freedom? In our last community playtest, we surrounded our key areas with mountains. Our thinking was that mountains would somehow keep the players within the zone they're supposed to explore. They're big, they're tall, there's nothing to find there, and riding uphill is slow, so there isn't much incentive to go there. Guess what happened? Everyone immediately went to the mountains. After lots of attempts, we realized that we won't be able to constrain anyone at all, so instead we decided to embrace that. We stopped trying to off-put players from going certain places, and we added meaningful gameplay almost everywhere. If you don't want to use the main entrance to a location, you can climb on that hill next to it and jump inside. In most cases the terrain will allow for fun gameplay and there will be some stuff to discover. To guide the player we use waypoints and objectives. If you get lost, you can climb a watchtower or speak to an NPC to get directions. And of course the level generation plays a big role here. We have to make sure that key locations are visible and well telegraphed. But what are these locations exactly? Our level system mixes randomly generated terrain with handmade areas that get merged into it. Each area we call a point of interest, or POI for short. POIs usually offer slower and more mechanically challenging gameplay and some rewards. But the problem is that we don't have any idea where the player will come from and how fast they'll be going. Because of that, we made the POI design to resemble skate parks. There are a bunch of ramps, rails and balls, which can be traversed in any way. And to regulate the speed, we play with terrain features and put evil robots. Ah, yes, and this brings me to the next big design challenge. When designing the enemy interaction, we had one main question on our mind. How the heck does combat on a hoverboard work? Do you ram the robots? Do you fight them with a melee attack, or do you shoot them at a distance? To find the answers, we needed to first establish the role and importance of combat. In Overrider, the goal of the enemies is to keep you moving and to incentivize you to go fast. So that means they're tied to the movement. With this in mind, we lean towards leveraging the player's speed as a weapon. Hitting a robot at high speed will damage or destroy it. That works pretty well whenever you manage to pull this off, but the problem comes when you miss the target or when there's not enough speed. Destroying a single enemy can quickly become quite a tedious process where you circle around it trying to gather speed. And of course the enemy has to have some kind of attack cycle, so even if you get everything right, you could get blasted in the face just before hitting the target. So we thought we should add a melee attack which does less damage, but you can use it on demand. It didn't go well at first, but after lots and lots of iterations, we have something decent. When hitting an enemy, your speed gets reduced proportionally to its mass, so engaging in combat shifts towards slower gameplay. When moving slowly, Vyra's attack is weaker, and there is mutual knockback. Some robots also have shields that you need to consider. There are some aids that make the whole experience more streamlined. For example, during attack, virus velocity redirects to the nearest target, which helps with the accuracy, and if you're about to hit an enemy at high speed, it will slightly postpone its attack, so it doesn't shoot you when it's too late to react. This formula makes robots dangerous when moving slowly, and not so much if you're going fast, which is perfect. If you don't want to fight, you simply have to keep your speed up, and as soon as you attack, the gameplay shifts. But just adding enemy robots doesn't make for a fulfilling hoverboard experience. There needed to be some form of racing, and you guys were also pretty vocal in the comments about that. It was about time we looked into this. Our concept doesn't quite allow us to have racing with other riders, at least not yet, so we had to come up with something that makes sense in the game world and still feels like racing. One such thing is what we internally call the battery rush. Every now and then you'll find a charging station with a battery attached. Taking the battery triggers a checkpoint rally. You'll need to bring the battery to a device somewhere away from the charging station, but the battery charge is dropping and there are Tesla coils that can be used to charge it up. You need to go through them in order to reach the device before the charge runs out. Depending on how fast you are, you can unlock additional goodies upon delivering the battery. But wait, there's more! We also created a chasing mechanic. There are these runner bots that hold key items and are trying to run away from you. Your task is of course to catch them. The thing with the runner bots is that you never know where they're gonna go. They change their trajectory every once in a while, and you'll need quick reactions. So far so good, but there is still probably one question on your mind.
How is this game a roguelike?
If you die in Overrider, you start over, cause you're an overrider. Each time you start a new run, you'll get a new configuration of the game world and therefore you'll discover different gadgets. Vira will find gadgets inside special capsules spread across the desolate lands. And there are all kinds of them. There's one that can make you jump really high, or if you're into hovering, you can do that too. The grab hook lets you take shortcuts, or maybe you can use the circuit breaker to disrupt robot electronics. There are lots of choices and Vira can equip up to 5 gadgets. Each equipped gadget opens up new possibilities and changes how the game plays and feels. But to achieve this, we can't simply throw any features that we think of in the mix and hope for the best. Gadgets have to be carefully curated and balanced. It's a tough and iterative process, but thankfully there are design tools like Milanote, which help us organize things and make sense of it all. One more thing, Vira can also perform upgrades inside workshops. Here not only the gadgets can be advanced, but also stats like the speed and trick performance. Upgrading requires microtech, which is salvaged from robots and chests. In the previous video I referred to that as scrap, and I used a specific icon that left some of you scratching your heads. Speaking of the previous video, last time some of you compared the game to Fortnite. The thing is, believe it or not, we didn't even know there were hoverboards in Fortnite, so we haven't really used it as a reference. Warframe's K-Drive is pretty cool on the other hand, but to be honest, we're aiming for something different. From the mechanics to the game loop, Overrider is built around hoverboard riding, and every aspect of its design aims to reinforce that. But let us know your thoughts in the comments. Is there something you personally would change? Of course, keep in mind that most of what I showed is still a work in progress. Okay, back on track. Let's talk about... Now, if we were smarter, we would have gone for something like this. Clean, pretty, readable and functional. But instead, well, you already saw what we're going for. There are only 2 artists on our team, and to get the most out of them, we invested most of our pre-production time in refining a stable and flexible pipeline. This guy in particular did. His approach was unusual to say the least. In most projects, you would first pick the art direction and then figure out the workflow to bring the vision to life. Not here, nope. Sergo spent months designing a pipeline that can adapt to different art styles instead, and went by only a couple of stylistic references. To be honest, I didn't think that would work out, and at one point it put the whole team on our toes, but we trusted Sergo's process regardless, and it turned out okay. Now with a few clicks we can change the color scheme of the entire game, we can make a scene dirty, overgrown, rusty or clean, and we can change the looks of objects to make them almost unrecognizable. After a bit of testing we went for a semi-stylized look. That enables us to go crazy with the gritty abandoned sci-fi stuff, and then balance it out with mild organics and vibrant colors. A good example of the principles we're introducing is Kenna. The game presents itself as stylized and magical, but if you look closely, the environments use a lot of photorealistic elements, and there's quite some detail as well. Our pipeline allows us to do just that, and helps us reuse lots of content along the way without it being too obvious, which in turn allows us to produce big volumes of content quickly. Having art finally allows us to get Overrider out in the world and showcase it, which is another challenge of its own, but I'm not gonna get into that right now. What I will say is that we now have an official Steam page and you should go smash that wishlist button. And if you want to get a chance to test an early version of the game, you can join our Discord. So, What's next? From here we're going to work on implementing the story and characters, which we already have. We'll add various abilities, more enemies, more locations, sounds and music to the mix. There is a ton of cool stuff we'd like to add as well, like character and board customization, voice acting, animated cutscenes, unlockable tricks and various items that can be discovered across the world, but our budget and timeline are restricted. And this is why we are preparing a Kickstarter campaign. If you'd like to support us there, stay tuned, there's gonna be news on that very soon. And if you enjoyed the video and like how the project is shaping up, consider liking and subscribing. If you have a friend who's into this type of games, which I'm not sure what kind of game it is exactly, show this to them. We have a passionate community, and with everyone's help and feedback, I know we can really build something nice and unique. Thank you so much for watching, and I'll see you next time.